Hi. Um, Remember, we talked last week about the fact that this is the season of Lent, and Lent is our time to prepare for Easter. And during Lent, we talk about Jesus' life between the time he was born and then the time that he died and was resurrected on Easter. Last week we talked about the fact that Jesus was a child when he was born. He was a baby and he had parents, and he was a baby just as we all were babies when we were born. Now we're going to talk about a time a little bit later in Jesus' life when he was around 12. And I tried to find something to show you, and there are of course no pictures of Jesus, and we can only imagine what he looked like, but I pictured 12-year-old boys I've known, my son, my brothers, my students, and 12-year-old boys, they're starting to grow a lot and are becoming men, but they're not men yet. They're still boys. They're often kind of tall and thin, sometimes kind of big hands and feet, and of course Jesus would have been dark-haired and dark-eyed, and I like to picture him at age 12, this boy. And in this story, it was a holiday, a high holy day, which we call a holiday. And he and his parents went from where they lived, which was Nazareth, to the city of Jerusalem to celebrate this high holy day. And they did. And after their celebration was over, they were walking back home to Nazareth, and they realized that they didn't know where Jesus was. They assumed that he was with the other children, walking along this dusty road back to Nazareth, but when they searched for him, they couldn't find him. And they were so afraid. They rushed back to Jerusalem, and they looked and they looked. They looked every place they had been, every place they could think of, and they couldn't find him. Now, I've been that afraid before. I'm a parent, and you think, what happened? Did he get hurt? Did somebody take him? Where could he possibly be? As a last thought, they went to the temple, and there he was. And they came rushing in when they saw him, but then they saw what was happening, and they stopped and listened. And Jesus was talking to the priests in the temple, and they were listening to him. He was actually teaching them. The guys who know more than anybody, he was teaching them. And finally, they spoke and they said, like parents do, "What are you doing here? Why aren't you with us? Where have you been? We've been so worried about you." And Jesus looked at them and so surprised, and he said, "Didn't you know I would be in my Father's house?" Well, they didn't know what to say then, because their father's house was in Nazareth. Joseph was a carpenter in Nazareth, and it didn't make a whole lot of sense to them. But they remembered. And later on in Jesus' life, that made perfect sense. this week, think about Jesus as a boy, a 12-year-old boy, who was a boy. He had friends, he liked to play, he got into mischief sometimes, but he was also already representing his Father, God, here on earth, and starting to get the attention of people who realized how important he was.